We're still talking about wood. First you have to become the wood. So what wood are you going to become? When I first started woodworking 44 years ago, the principal cabinet wood was walnut. Everybody wanted walnut. Here's an example of walnut. See how dark it is. And when you, of course, this is raw dressed walnut. So it's going to get a lot darker when you put a finish on it. Most guys will wet it a little bit to show you how dark it's going to be when it's finished. So this is a pretty dark wood. Now, one of the funny things is that principal woods for cabinetry change all the time. They change like a fad changes. So walnut, when I started, walnut was the principal cabinet wood. And it was fairly expensive, maybe $5 a board foot. And a little interesting anecdote is that cherry was not very popular 40 years ago. You couldn't give cherry away. But now it's exactly the opposite. Now cherry is prized, it's the principal cabinet wood, and walnut is out of favor. Although walnuts in the last 5 years, maybe 10 years, walnut has been coming back. So this is walnut, grows on a walnut tree. Most woods are named by their tree. So walnut would come from a walnut tree. There is one notable exception to that rule, and that is basswood. There's no such thing as a bass tree. Basswood comes from a linden tree. Why they call the wood from a linden tree basswood and not linden, I don't know. But since I'm dealing with a global audience, maybe if somebody knows that, they can email me at askwoodguy@aol.com. But the principal cabinet wood now is cherry, not walnut. This is an example of cherry. And you see, it's not nearly as dark as walnut. So now, when cherry is old, it gets darker and darker. Just like cutting an apple. When you cut an apple, you know, in a half hour, it's brown. So cherry is the same way, only it takes more than an hour. It takes more like 10 years for it to get dark. It has a lot to do with oxidation and the light that hits it. So most people, when they work with cherry, will stain it dark, darker to begin with, so that you don't wait for that. But if you wait for that 5 to 10 years, cherry gets rich and dark and has a deep luster to it. So that's why it's a principal cabinet wood now. But walnut is making a return. And these are all domestic woods. They grow in the United States. Those are the woods we use the most. Mostly hardwoods I'm talking about now. The next most common hardwood in America is maple. And since we're in Atlanta, Georgia, it's southern maple. There are two kinds of maple, two major kinds of maple, and that is southern maple and northern maple. Maple is the most benign of all woods. Some woods, people are allergic to the sawdust. Some people are allergic to even the touch of some woods, but nobody is allergic to maple because maple is, I mean, we pour its sap on our pancakes. Maple is the most benign of all woods, so you don't have to worry about breathing the dust from maple or anything. Well, you shouldn't breathe dust, but maple is the most benign. And, you know, maple is what we use for our countertops. When we're chopping food or something, it's always on maple. Another interesting thing about maple is maple has the most figure of any domestic wood. There's all sorts of different patterns in the grain of maple. We'll get into that later. And maple is the whitest of woods. I guess the whitest wood would be holly. And, you know, holly is a shrub. it's a bush, but you know, some holly trees are huge. I mean, some bushes get up to be trees. And that is the whitest of all woods. So in marquetry, holly is always used for the very whiteness. So we have walnut and cherry and maple. The next common wood in my realm, in my domain in Georgia, is Appalachian red oak. We have more of this than any wood. There's probably over 180 different species of oak in Atlanta, Georgia. They grow everywhere. When I look out the window and I see those hardwood trees out there, you know, 60% of them are oak. So there's two kinds of oak. There's red oak and there's white oak. As you can see, this is red oak, this is white oak. Now, some red oak is white and some white oak is red. In fact, some white oak is green. So, and I don't mean green full of sap, I mean green hue in color. So it's hard to tell by exactly what color. White oak is much denser and heavier than red oak is. So if you are building a staircase, then you could build the whole staircase out of red oak with no problems. The balusters and the banisters, they could all be red oak. But the step treads themselves, where the foot hits the tread, should be white oak because it's much denser and harder. You can't tell the difference by the color. Well, you can if you're a pro, you can do it a lot, but you can see it's pretty close to the same color. I can tell this board is much heavier than this board. So this is the white oak board. Now, the way you tell if you're a cabinet maker is you can cut off 1.5 inches off the board. Just cut 1.5 inches off the end of a board. And with red oak, you can blow through it. But with white oak, you can't. White oak is much denser, harder, wears better. White oak is a wood to go to if you want density and you want long life. Now, oak is strong, so oak would have a use as hammer handles and tool handles. And oak has a unique feature in that it has medullary rays. The British would say medullary. But they come from the heart of the tree, the very center of the tree, and the rays go out to the bark. So those rays can be exposed if you're quarter sawing the board. So if you're sawing a board directly through the center of the board, you'll get a bunch of patchy places by the size of a quarter. And those are the medullary rays coming through. I don't know, you might be able to see that on the side of this board. We'll be covering Australian lacewood in the next lesson, and that has lots of medullary rays in it. So those are the principal domestic woods. And southern maple has its cousin, northern maple, which is sort of the same characteristics as red oak and white oak. They look alike, but one is much denser than the other one. So northern maple is sometimes called rock maple or rock hard maple. It is much harder than southern maple. So the next wood that's fairly common in the South is ash. So this is ash. You see how it looks a lot like oak, and it is a lot like oak and can be used for the same purposes, except it is much whiter in color. So I am developing a process in which I can change any of these woods into ash. This is another common dense hardwood. This is birch. We don't have a lot of it in the South, but they do in the North. So birch is a common wood above the Mason-Dixon line. And it is dense and hard. Now you see, oak is a porous wood. It has pores in it. That's the transverse cut of the capillaries in the wood, of the little veins inside the wood that keep the wood wet, keep the water from the ground coming up in the tree, the capillary action and the molecular pull of the water molecules pull that up into the little vessels inside the tree. Now, some trees have large vessels. Some trees have small vessels. The small vessel trees are tight-grained woods, and the large vessel trees are porous woods. So when you cut the surface, they're pores. If you look very close into the surface, you can see little pores of wood. And those pores take the finish and suck it away from the surface. So when you finish a porous wood, you usually take one step called filling the pores, where you take a wood filler and rub it into the pores and then wipe it off, so all of the finish doesn't soak into those big pores. Oak is a big porous wood. Walnut has a lot of pores. Ash has pores, but maple does not. Maple is not a large pore wood, so you don't have to take that step when you're finishing maple. Maple is a great wood to finish because you can get by with less coats. The second coat's just laying straight on the top. Well, that covers the most of the common hardwoods in my area in Georgia. Of course, now every tree has its associated wood. So you have sycamore, you have persimmon, you have willow. All of those relate to all of these woods. These are the common woods because they're plentiful and because they work well. Every wood has its own special characteristics. Some woods will split when you put a nail in them. Some woods won't split when you hit them with an axe. So that covers most of the common domestic woods. Next time, we'll cover most of the imported woods.